you've shared with me before that you once were a single event trial lawyer.
Yeah.
But once tort reform happened in Texas and you had no choice but to adapt and reinvent and change the way you were doing things, you started a mass tort firm and the entire game changed. What I'm most interested to hear, and like while you're speaking about what shaped you and created character, I'm interested to hear how you created this shift in your career, in your business practice. Was there a breakthrough there for you? How did that all unfold?
Well, I told my favorite opponent, he was a lobbyist for the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And I fought him all the time at the legislature in the legislative battles. And he said, I'm going to put you out of business someday. And I said, well, good luck with that. So at the time, I had 5 lawyers, and our docket was about 35 cases. Of course, every case, they were all catastrophic injury or major event cases. We didn't have anything but that. So, and my personal docket was generally 2 cases. It'd be the next one coming up for trial, and maybe the next one after that. And then I would consult on the rest of them. And so, I mean, I had a pretty ideal setup, and it was working extremely well. But I only had 35 cases on my docket for 5 lawyers. So tort reform came along, and I preached for years in my speeches. I said, if the Republicans ever get control of the governorship, the lieutenant governorship, and the Supreme Court all at the same time, we're dead in the water. And I'd be trying to get trial lawyers to contribute to Democrats to keep this thing going. And, oh, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And to me, the term Republican trial lawyer is the ultimate oxymoron with the emphasis on moron. But so my MDJD that worked with me had been with me for 25 years, and he's a Republican. And I kept telling him, I said, your party's going to put me out of business one day. So I was up at the legislature doing a little lobbying, and I read the bill that was being proposed on medical negligence. And it hadn't been put up for a vote yet, but I could count noses pretty easily. And so I went back home, walked in his office, and I said, okay, we've taken our last medical negligence case. We're through. We're out of the business. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, just like I told you, your friends in the Republican Party are going to put us out of business because we passed the most egregious malpractice bill since Indiana. It was just horrible. Yeah. And actually, since then, I've only tried one malpractice case, and that was in 2003. And I've tried one malpractice case since then, and that was one that was held over from the pre-reform days. But I said, well, your Republican friends have put us out of business. He said, no, that's not possible. I said, well, let me just tell you, we're done with it. We're through. Mm-hmm. And so I realized then that they were going to apply this. They were going to be even more fortunate than malpractice, and they were applying this to torts across the board. And so I realized that there's no place for majority. Someone who does nothing but the big cases, big litigation. We're not going to have a place anymore in Texas. It's just not going to be available to us. There are going to be limitations of every type. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I declared myself to be a mass tort lawyer.
Yeah.
So I started.
Or did you do your research and you try to identify what you were going to do next?
Yeah, I had to decide which one I was going to get into. And so I looked around, and Zyprexa was still around, and they had had 2 settlements on Zyprexa already. And I took a bit of a risk because I was telling my guy doing a gathering with me, I said, I want to take Zyprexa cases. And he said, no, the statute of limitations already run. And I said, no, they're not going to search statute of limitations where I'll make it cost more for them to prosecute a summary judgment than it would be to pay me. So I started taking Zyprexa cases when everybody else is closing them out.
Mhm.
And they've already had one major settlement, then they've had a second settlement. And now they're saying there's not going to be any more. They've told the judge there's not going to be any more settlements. And so I started gathering, and I got 216 cases. And so I told them, and I got appointed to the plaintiff steering committee,
Mhm.
and I picked, and the judge came on one day, and as we're closing it out, he just finished up his second settlement. He said, "How many cases are left?" And so the clerk had it all right, all figured out. She said there are 1,200 cases left.
Mhm.
And he said, "Okay, let's do this." And he said, "Mr. Nations is here. He has 216 cases." So the judge thought he would intimidate me into settlement. So he said, "Well, I'll tell you what we used to do. We used to try cases 30 at a time in asbestos." And he said, "So why don't we do this?" This is July. He said, "Why don't we set cases for October, and we'll set 30 of them for trial in October." And let's do that. And so I stepped up and said, "Your Honor, since I'm the last remaining member of the plaintiff steering committee, I would request that all 30 of those be my cases." And he said, "Well, I don't think you're going to find anybody that's going to be fighting you for that honor. So let's do it." So I had 30 cases chosen as bellwethers on the spot to be tried in 3 months.
Wow.
So over the next 3 months, we took 78 depositions all over the country. As Pepper Hamilton was on the other side. We took 78 depositions all over the country. We did Daubert, we did everything. And we came down, and then the other side, Pepper Hamilton, moved to have the case continued because they said they couldn't be ready. And so they moved it to February. So in January, Pepper Hamilton called me and they said, "We want to mediate." And I said, "No." And they said, "No." And I said, "No, we want to, why?" And I said, "You want to mediate so you can tell the judge that you've tried diligently to settle this case at mediation with Mr. Nations, and that he's just a hard-headed SOB who won't settle. So why don't we skip all that, and I give you my permission to tell the judge that I'm a hard-headed SOB who won't settle, and we can do it without all the cost." And so we went right on into January, and they finally called me and said, "Okay, we really want to talk to you." So I said, "Okay, but I'll only talk to the man with the checkbook in his hand. I got to meet with your general counsel, the man who has the authorization to make a settlement." So then they came back and said, "Okay, long story short, we got that meeting scheduled." So we went in and sat down for that meeting, and he starts off by saying, "Okay, so you have 215 cases." And I said, no, I don't. He said, "Well, how many do you have?" And I said, "I have 1,203. And he's like, "Oh, what?" And he just went ballistic. And I said, "You don't think I've really been spending all this money doing all these depositions and everything else, and I haven't bothered to gather any more cases?"
Yeah.
I said, "I have 1,203 cases. And so anyway, long story short, after that, we managed to negotiate, and this is strange because the negotiation came down to not how much they'll pay. The negotiation started out with how many cases will you pay me on? And so they finally agreed that they would pay me on 999 cases. And they said, because it said, "We'll never pay you on 1,000 cases." I said, "Okay, then pay me on 999. So they did, they agreed. And so they're like, "But how are you going to get rid of your cases? How are you?" I said, "That's my problem." I said, "I will settle 999 cases with you." They said, So we left the office. I shouldn't tell this story because the rest of it's funny, but we left the office, and my co-counsel who worked for me looked over and said, "We don't have 999 cases." And I said, "No, but we will by Friday." We only had like 549 cases, and I settled 999.
And that was your first experience in mass torts?
Yeah. And so we got on the phone. We came back and got on the phone, and we called the people who had the 1,200 cases, the rest of the cases, and said, "Look, here's the deal. You can tag on to this settlement, which was extremely good. You can tag on to this settlement. You do all the work with the plaintiff. All you do is send me names, social security numbers, and nature of the injury, and send me a spreadsheet." And so we gathered up. We could have gotten all 1,200 if we wanted them, but we signed up. We picked the 999 cases we wanted to submit, and we submitted by Friday. We gave them a spreadsheet with 999 cases on it, and they paid us top dollar on all 999, and they felt great because they had beat me out of 200 cases.